interacting with the attendees and having like a Zoom meeting as opposed to the webinar, but I'm excited nonetheless.
Yeah, I'm really excited too to welcome you. So we're here today to hear a little bit about Kenyon College. I'm in California, so I'm sitting outside enjoying the sunshine. But you are not. You're in Ohio right now. Is that right, JJ?
That is correct. Yeah. I actually live a few minutes away from our campus, which is in Gambier, Ohio. It's located about an hour northeast of Columbus and about an hour and a half south of Cleveland, Ohio.
Oh, wonderful. How's the weather over there right now?
It's like low 60s right now. It was raining a little bit earlier, but I think it's better now. I think it's going to be on and off today. Partly sunny, but cloudy and rainy as well. You just never know in Ohio what the weather has in store for you on any given day.
Yeah, because I think you have a summer picture, right? Everything's so green. The leaves are on
Oh
their
yeah, yeah. This is in the summer behind me. Yeah, this is definitely not what it looks like right now.
Beautiful. Well, I'm so excited to welcome you, as well as our student panelists. So basically, why don't you just give us a little introduction to who you all are and why you're joining us today, and that way we can get to know you.
Perfect. Yeah. Thank you, Josephine. Hi, everyone. My name is JJ Jemison. I use he, him, his pronouns. I graduated from Kenyon in 2013. I was an American Studies major with a focus in public policy. I played varsity soccer all 4 years. I was a member of the Black Student Union and really involved with social and political activism on campus, but also in Knox County. I'm actually one of the few local students that ultimately comes to Kenyon. Only about 10% of our student body are from Ohio, and I actually am from Knox County. I graduated from Mount Vernon High School, which is the local public school about 10 minutes away from our campus in Gambier, Ohio. This is my 4th year working for the admissions office back at my alma mater. So it's really such an honor and a pleasure every day to be representing this institution that is so near and dear to my heart. I am in charge of events on campus and virtually, and then also oversee the territories of Alabama, Mississippi, and Arkansas. So my colleagues in the admission office, we all have territories that we oversee. And so I'd be the first reader on every applicant from those states. I'm joined today by 2 of my amazing colleagues, both current Kenyon students, both seniors, and I'm going to have them introduce themselves in just a second. After they're done, I'll do a brief intro about Kenyon, just kind of overview highlights, and then start us off with the first question for our student panelists. And then after that, I'd love to hear what questions you all have. But if you're not, I'm also happy to guide the conversation as well, and then leave a few minutes at the end for just a kind of an admission process overview, how to apply, what's required, et cetera. And so with that, Sean, why don't you start off with introductions?
So hi, I'm Sean. I'm a senior at Kenyon. I am a women's and gender studies major, but I also did like the pre-nursing track, so I'll be going to nurse midwifery school in the fall. I'm from Sonoma County, California, and outside of admissions, I do a couple things on campus. It's been a little bit restricted because of COVID, but I tutor at my old high school right now. At Kenyon, I was a Kenyon Educational Enrichment Program scholar, and I also did research in the biology department for some time, and I participated in the Cascade Scholars Program, and I also work at the Writing Center as a Writing Center liaison for the English department, and I also help students with their science papers. And I do a couple other things that I'll bring up if the questions kind of call for it.
Awesome. Thank you, Sean. Johanna?
Yeah. Hello, everyone. My name is Johanna. I use she, they pronouns, and I'm originally from San Antonio, Texas. I am majoring in international studies on the environment track with an area concentration in Latin America. So basically what that means, I study environmental policy and practice in Central and South America. I'm also a Spanish minor. And then in terms of my extracurriculars, I am a co-founder and co-chair of an organization on campus called Kenyon Sin Fronteras, which means Kenyon Without Borders in Spanish, which we founded with the express purpose of opening up a wider dialogue about the impacts of immigration policy and borders, particularly at the US-Mexico border. I also volunteered at the BFEC, which is the Brown Family Environmental Center. It's like a 500-acre nature preserve that's part of Kenyon's general domain. I also volunteered at Wigan Elementary, which is local elementary school. And I also had the opportunity to go abroad to Costa Rica, where I studied sustainable development for a couple months. So happy to answer any and all questions about those various things.
Great. So nice to meet you both.
Yeah, great to meet you both.
Awesome. Thank you both. And I'm glad that you mentioned study abroad. I forgot to mention that I actually did an off-campus study program domestically, though, at American University in DC, second semester of my junior year. And so we call them off-campus study because we have both domestic and international opportunities for you to study off-campus. And about 50% of the student body will study off-campus or abroad in their junior year, typically for either a semester or the entire year, sometimes even two separate programs for each semester. And so I just want to give an overview about Kenyon because we are a very small liberal arts and sciences institution, somewhat of a niche school in that we are known as the Writers College. Writing is emphasized across the curriculum at Kenyon. We have an amazing English department and the Kenyon Review, which is a world-renowned publishing company in literary magazine, is housed on campus, although a separate entity technically. But that's not necessarily the reason why. Those two things aren't necessarily the whole reason why we're known as the Writers College. We have about 50 different majors, minors, and concentrations you can choose from. And no matter what class you take at Kenyon, you'll be doing a lot of reading and a lot of writing. You're going to grow exponentially as a writer, even if you're already very good. And so I always like to mention that. I mentioned that we're located in Gambier, Ohio earlier. We're a small liberal arts and sciences institution. We have about 1,700 students in total, and we're one of the few institutions in the country where students live on campus all 4 years. We're 100% residential college, and I think that is a huge piece of who we are as an institution and the type of community that we have. The community is really unlike any other place I've ever been a part of or visited. I've been on a lot of different college and university campuses and still have yet to find a more welcoming and collaborative community than that of Kenyon. And so in addition to that community aspect, I think the intentionality that every single student, faculty, and staff member kind of find their way to Kenyon with is absolutely essential. It's not the type of institution that you're going to just be driving down the highway and see a sign for and be like, oh, let me go check this place out. Kenyon, because we are located in rural central Ohio, it's a place where you kind of have to have heard about or know about before you make the commitment to come and visit campus, which I highly encourage everybody who would be interested in a small liberal arts institution to visit in person, which obviously during a pandemic is difficult. And we're not actually offering in-person visits right now. We hope to at some point in the near future, but seeing a place and trying to picture yourself there for the next 4 years can really have a huge impact on your college search process and really then ultimately the trajectory of your life. And so, but I do think that Kenyon, seeing it in person and trying to get a vibe for the community, the people that we have here, the resources that are available, it's really amazing to be able to see that in person. The last piece I want to mention is the faculty and student relationships. And really, I think a lot of small liberal arts and sciences institutions kind of reference that and use that as one of their talking points. But at Kenyon, it's different. We were the first institution in the country to have formalized call it advisory program. And so I think it was in 1841 when Rutherford B. Hayes referenced it in a letter to his mother about how they're starting this new program where every faculty member is going to be hand matched with a current student to be their advisor. And now that's since been replicated by almost every institution in one way or another, whether that be through pre-professional advising or academic advising. But at Kenyon, we just call them faculty advisors because they're more than just as for the students' growth. It's also about their growth as a person. The faculty, I mentioned the intentionality earlier, they're also very intentional about choosing to work at a place like Kenyon because they want to collaborate with the students. They want to build lifelong relationships with their students. And so just as a side anecdote, I actually invited 3 professors to my wedding, and that shows you how close we were. Even after I graduated from Kenyon, we kept in touch. And so those are some highlights. I could talk about Kenyon for days. Obviously, it's my job, but it's also my love, my passion. And so, but I'm going to stop talking because I want you all to hear from our current Kenyan students who are the world's leading experts on the Kenyan experience. And so with that, I'm going to ask you this first question, and then Josephine, Amanda, any questions that you all have, I want to hear, and you can hear directly from the students who we always say in admissions at Kenyon, we're not trying to sell anything. We are just trying to genuinely and authentically represent Kenyon, the type of institution that we are, the type of community that we have. And we know it's not a perfect place by any means. And it's not always going to be the perfect fit for every student, far from it. But I think it takes a special type of student to want to go off the beaten path and do something different and take a risk and potentially find themselves at a place like Kenyon. So along those lines, I'm curious if you all don't mind sharing your personal anecdotes, your personal stories about how you found out about Kenyon, and then ultimately why you chose Kenyon over other respective institutions. And whoever would like to go first. Yeah, Johanna, and then Sean.
Yeah, so I'm kind of a special case, especially whenever it comes to other Kenyan students. Kenyon was the only small liberal arts school I applied to. I was mainly applying to like really big research universities, and those like were who I came into most contact with during my college search. But then an admissions officer from Kenyon visited my high school and like really, I suppose, walked me through like what I would be able to experience if I chose Kenyon, essentially. So I grilled her on like, because at the time I wanted to be a bio major and like do pre-med. And I still love the department, but it's just not what I ended up choosing. And I grilled her on like bio research at liberal arts institutions. And I was like, will I be able to do this? Will I be able to like prepare myself for medical school? And she essentially kind of like walked me through a day in the life of like a potential bio major. She's like, well, if you have bio classes, you'd probably be in this building in Higley. You would most likely live in these freshman dorms. You would eat with your friends here. And it was just like such a lovely picture that I couldn't help but be just really intrigued by it. So I looked more and more into Kenyon, and I really liked what I saw. And I ended up choosing it just because it felt like the right decision for me at the time. I knew that I wanted like a slightly more intimate setting than maybe what I had originally thought that I wanted. And yeah, all the different elements of like the intentionality, the intimacy, the comfort, the general just like sense that I got from other people that I spoke to about Kenyon. It just seemed like a very welcoming place for me that I knew that I wanted to be a part of.
Yeah, so I am a first gen student, so my parents were just kind of like, go to college, I don't care which college you go to, like pick one, but you're going. That said, I was also very privileged in that I was a part of the Upward Bound program at Sonoma State. And so they, really helped me kind of figure out the difference between CSUs, UCs, privates. But at the end of the day, all they can really do is give you information, but then you have to make the decision on what type of school you want to go to. And I am one of the most indecisive people probably that there is. And so I applied to over 20 schools, including like research institutions to small private liberal arts colleges. And it wasn't until towards the end of the application process that I started to narrow down what I really wanted. And part of that was because I took the survey on College Board that like matches you with certain institutions. So after I took the survey and really thought about what I wanted, they matched me with 3 schools. And I always say that I was really upset because I was like, how is it that out of the entire country, I matched with 3 schools? Are you kidding me? But one of those schools was Kenyon, and that's how I heard about Kenyon. And I ended up applying. Truth be told, I was waitlisted, and then I had already committed to another small private liberal arts college, but then Kenyon kind of was, I'm forgetting the phrase, but basically they were like, hey, we have a spot. And I was like, okay, so I went to go visit campus. I met admissions officers. Students took time to take me to lunch and tell me about their study abroad experiences. They told me how collaborative the environment was, and they were just super helpful. The students were helpful, and the admissions people were helpful. And I got to see where I would live and what the WGS department was like and the bio department. And I kind of just, it was one of those, like, you kind of just know, like by the time I was done with the visit, I was like, yeah, I'm definitely going to make the switch. So that was kind of my path to finding Kenyon.
That's awesome. Thank you both for sharing those personal stories. I just posted in the chat just kind of what I was speaking to, and I don't know if the chat is being recorded. Is it being recorded or no? I don't think so, right? And okay, but anyway, basically what I put a link there. If Amanda, Josephine, if you want to check it out later, it's just it's hearing those stories reminded me of the fact, kind of what I was speaking to earlier, how it takes a special type of person who's going to go off the beaten path, right? Especially to explore out of state or far away from home, wherever. And I think Sean and Johanna are perfect examples of students who ultimately took a risk, to even come and visit Kenyon. But one statement here from in our communications department was talking about this, and I love the way it really resonated with me, and so I just wanted to add the fact that you don't come to Gambier for the nightlife or the restaurant scene. You choose Kenyon because you seek to explore what matters to you in a small, wide open space, surrounded by a multifaceted community of friends and faculty who view themselves as partners in inquiry. And that was a really powerful statement to me, and I think it really does a good job of explaining, why you come to a place like Kenyon, which really was a social experiment, if you come to think about it. Philander Chase, who founded Gambier, but also Kenyon, back in the early 1800s. We're actually the oldest private college in Ohio. I forgot to mention that, but we're the only institution that I'm aware of anyway, where the college actually surrounds the town, right? Most cities are in a city or next to a city or next to a town, and they're kind of separate. Gambier and Kenyon are it's an interesting dynamic between the village of Gambier and the college and Kenyon College. So I always like to mention that it was kind of a social experiment that, as far to my knowledge, I don't think has been replicated. But I think it worked out. And so, do you all have questions for Sean and Johanna? Yeah, Amanda.
Yes, I do. And also just reactions. Both of you are just so involved, and that's amazing to hear. It sounds like you're having a great time. And I also really wanted to acknowledge that I think both of you said something to the effect of it just felt right. And I'll let Josephine kind of elaborate on this, but we're always telling our students to reflect on themselves and how the process and the journey and the college that they're looking into makes them feel. And Josephine, you can talk about our podcast, Mindful Admissions. That's literally all about that. But I think that's really powerful that, you looking into the college and you felt that this was the right move for you. With that being said, I do have a question. You both are so involved. I mean, Sean, you didn't even get through all of the things that you're involved with. Is everyone on campus as engaged as you, or do some people specialize like with one thing and really go with it? Or, what does that look like for your fellow classmates? And either one of you can answer.
I want to hear both of your perspectives, actually. So.
I think, sorry, Johanna. But I think one of the things that I love about, or one of the statements that I love that admissions people usually say is that like Kenyon students wear multiple hats. And so I think that like Kenyon is the type of place to where you can like specialize and do something super concentrated. So for example, for the WGS major, I have to do, well, not just me, but all the WGS majors, we have to do like a final capstone. And all majors have to do a final senior project, but for the WGS project specifically, it's a presentation where you're able to kind of do this like very narrow focus on whatever you want to do. So I'm doing like negative representations of midwifery and home birth in a popular culture and in the 21st century. So you can get like that, like specific, or you could also do like, but I can also do like all these other things that will advance my career. So I think that the reason I'm so involved is just because like I knew that having a well-rounded education, not just in the classroom, but also outside, will definitely help who you are professionally. So you're able to kind of work with different groups of people for different purposes. And so I find that a lot of Kenyan students, yes, they have their own thing, like they like to do this specific type of research and study the specific type of thing, but also they're here at Kenyon because they want to do the extracurriculars and, build things with other community members. And I just think that it's a great school if you want to get involved, but also do something that you love.
Yeah, and kind of building off of that, like I think one of my favorite things about Kenyon is that you really get a chance to see people's evolution throughout their 4 years here. And extracurriculars and things that they're involved in, like clubs, research, different groups. And that's gonna change like pretty much every year. Like I know like whenever I was like a sophomore and a junior, I was a lot more involved in the environmental organization on campus, and I still get a chance to work with them through the organization I founded. But then I decided that I really wanted to focus on the things that I was particularly passionate about and the things that I wanted to pursue outside of Kenyon, especially like as a second semester senior. But yeah, like Sean said, Kenyon students wear a lot of hats, and people are students and athletes and like organization leaders and like spectators all at the same time, like just to list a few things, not even off the top of my head, but yeah, it's just kind of, it's going to vary a lot, but like I think pretty across the board, people are just doing what they're interested in doing. And because there's so much choice at Kenyon, like you just want to kind of you just kind of want to be able to do anything and everything. And Kenyon has the like availability just in general.
So Johanna, you mentioned that you started your own organization. So do you feel like that's really accessible to do, or that it's difficult? Like that sounds really exciting and like a lot of responsibility. So also tell us more about that experience.
Yeah, so I started my organization with a lot of other people my sophomore year. It was a part of the sociology class that I was taking called Borders and Border Crossings. And the point of the class was to essentially just like delve in deeper into issues of immigration and borders. And we actually got a chance to travel to the US-Mexico border in Arizona and really get a chance to see like what's happening on the ground, which is amazing and life-changing. And as part of the class, we had to do like give a presentation or just like engage with the campus in some way. And we ended up doing that, but then we also decided that we really just wanted to be able to prolong our presence on campus, if that makes sense. Like we really wanted to talk about this for as long as we could, because a lot of the experiences that we had, like both in the class and at the border, really changed us as people and changed our trajectories. And we just really wanted to be able to share that with the campus as a whole. And I will say that like the process itself is actually fairly easy. And I know quite a few other people who have started other organizations on campus. It's fairly easy, it's fairly accessible. And a lot of students are actually like encouraged to do it just because like it's there are like a lot of niches at Kenyon. And if like you want to create your own, like you are more than welcome to, and working with like the student council and the administration is like fairly easy. Everyone at Kenyon like refreshes their emails like every 5 minutes. So you get very quick responses, which is lovely whenever you're trying to create your own organization and kind of like get funds and get people interested. And like I said earlier, Kenyon students are very passionate, and they also have a deep desire to learn about other people's passions as well. So they're very curious and open-minded, and like if you have something to say, people will listen to you and listen with careful intent, which was very nice whenever I was forming my organization.
That sounds great. Yeah, both of you seem like you're doing really interesting things.
Yeah, I really resonate with your story and the organization you created, Johanna, because one of my main research topics in undergrad, at the end of my undergraduate degree, was actually doing research with undocumented immigrants and focusing on well-being, especially I did like a 2-part thesis because I did a dual degree. So one part I did from like an ethnographic standpoint in anthropology, and the other part I did as a meta-analysis in psychology. So it was really interesting to look at well-being of middle-aged undocumented immigrants from South America. I specifically focused on that population. And I also did a lot of interviews as part of the ethnographic approach. And like you said, it's just so life-changing to be able to connect with people who have backgrounds that are different than your own, and really being able to dive in. And I think it's just really, really cool that you've created this organization that will outlive you at Kenyon. That's awesome to hear. And that actually brings me to my question. You've both mentioned research a lot, and you've mentioned clubs and organizations. Because Kenyon is located in a smaller town, we get a lot of questions from students who ask, how do you actually get hands-on experience? How do you dabble in the field that you're in? And so I'd love to hear a little bit more about internship research opportunities or anything, or faculty mentorships, anything that you feel like has really contributed to your growth, also in a practical and hands-on way that makes it onto your resume, and in a way that makes you feel confident about entering the job world post-college.
Yeah, so as I was looking for undergrad institutions, I knew I wanted to go into healthcare. So I was like, I need research, or that's not always true, but like when you're in, senior in high school, you're like, I need research. So I was like looking for schools that, where that was accessible. And in some ways I would argue that at schools like Kenyon, sometimes you have a better better opportunities to get involved with science research specifically. And the reason why I say that is because we don't have any like master's students or PhD students who we're like competing with to get positions in research labs. So like faculty, they use Kenyon students, undergraduate students, to help them with their research or to progress their research. And so I was able to get involved with scientific research my first year at Kenyon. And so things changed towards the end, but had I, stayed in the lab through my 4th year at Kenyon, I would have had 4 years of research under my belt, as opposed to like if you go to a bigger research institution, sometimes you leave with, 1 or 2 years. Outside of that, I was able to do the Cascade Scholars Program that Kenyon offers, like through Kenyon specifically, that gives you a stipend, they give you housing, and you're able to stay at Kenyon over the summer to progress your research. And that program specifically is for students who don't have any research experience. So someone who's getting new to molecular methods and stuff like that, this is a great advantage for them. We also have something called Summer Science Scholars that gives you a stipend, housing, and that's for people who are maybe juniors or seniors and have they've already taken on their own project within a laboratory setting. We also have something called the Career Development Office. And so they can help you find research outside of Kenyon. And I know a lot of students who do like cancer research at OSU through a Pelotonia program, or the Pelotonia program that we have at Kenyon. The last thing for me specifically, I was able to have an internship that started off as unpaid in California. And through that internship, I was able to do, rounding with physicians in the inpatient setting, working at an outpatient setting, working at a gender affirming clinic, but it was unpaid. So I was like, at first I was like, well, I can't do it because I need money because I need to pay for school next year. And not only school next year, but then also like the living expenses for that summer. And so Kenyon has a program that you're able to apply to, and Kenyon funds, your experience. So I was able to do that internship because Kenyon gave me money to, live that summer. And so it was awesome. Kenyon has so many opportunities for internships and stuff like that. And if someone's worried about not having internship opportunities at a place like Kenyon, I would definitely say that's probably not something to super worry about.
So that sounds amazing. I think I speak both for Josephine and I when I say that. And to have the opportunity to do the thing that you really want to do, make ends meet while you're doing it, even if it's not paid, that's the dream for sure. And the only question I have is, what about, if there's a student that's not on the top of their game and they're not pursuing opportunities actively, and maybe they're a little homesick or they're struggling with the weather change, which everyone in Southern California probably does. What are the resources that, you know, Kenyon offers to students that are kind of lagging in their journey, or maybe they even need, you know, mental health help or just some extra support even outside of their, you know, their mentor? What does that look like?
I can speak a little bit about that. Like, I know that the adjustment for me definitely was not the easiest thing in the world, especially like I'm from Southern Texas. Ohio is the farthest north I've ever been. Snow was a lot. But one of the resources that I really took advantage of, especially my freshman year, was our community advisors, which is like the Kenyon version of like the residence advisor. And one of the things that I really liked about the program as a whole is that like they kind of act as like not necessarily like your mentor, but as someone like who's been through the same things that you're going through, who's a little bit older, who's a little bit wiser than you are as a freshman. And my wonderful community advisor, my CA, my freshman year really gave me so many opportunities to just kind of like grow a lot more, and also like really get myself more involved like within the Kenyon community as a whole. Like one of my favorite stories to tell is she like organized a movie night for everyone like on our part of the dorm, like the part that she was in charge of. And I didn't know anyone like going in. I was so nervous and shy, and I was just like really homesick, and I was like, I miss my cats more than anything in the whole wide world. But she kind of gathered us all together at the end of the first week of classes, whenever we were all just like a little bit more exhausted than we normally are. And she got us all together and watched Legally Blonde together in one of the auditoriums in the like science quad. And it was so like lovely and calming and exactly what I needed like in that moment. And while it's not necessarily like completely structured support, it was definitely something that like I like thought to myself, I was like, oh, I can find a community here. I can find people to be comfortable around and laugh with. Like I can create a home for myself here, which definitely helped like not necessarily like alleviate the homesickness immediately, but it helps like tamper it a little bit. And then of course, like in terms of like mental health resources, we have the Cox Health and Counseling Center, and students can make as many appointments as they need. They just call, or they actually go to the center to make an appointment with like the counselor of their choice. I have utilized this resource many a time, especially whenever things are a little bit more stressful than I would like them to be. It's just nice to have someone to talk to, just like a third party who you can just kind of like bounce ideas off of, or just kind of just like, whenever that happens. But yeah, I think like, but there's also just like a lot of kind of different resources at Kenyon for students like who are struggling with like various mental health issues, like, which I know I have utilized a lot.
That's really important. And I think sometimes people forget that they're going to need that, because it's so exciting going to college. Like, oh, it's going to be perfect and I'm going to have so much fun and it's never going to be stressful. And I think it's important to remember that actually sometimes things are more stressful in some ways, and that it's absolutely okay to seek out a psychologist or a mentor or counselor, especially when you don't know anyone. And although Kenyon's not, a huge school like ASU or something, you can still feel very lonely if you've never seen any of these people before. So that's good. I'm glad. And it sounds like they facilitate as well, making friends, and that's cool too.
I do also want to say, like, Kenyon really does treat you like a person and not just a number or a student. And the reason I say this is because speaking on like mental health, and things get harder, sometimes unexpectedly. My junior year, I planned to stay at Kenyon my entire junior year, but my faculty advisor actually looked at me and she was like, "Are you okay? What's going on?" And I was dealing with a lot of things back home, and it was affecting, my work and, in the classroom and my relationships outside of the classroom. And she was like, "How about you go talk to one of the counselors that we have here, counselor connected me with the dean of students, and we collectively made the decision that it would be best for me to take a personal leave of absence from Kenyon for my junior year. And so I was able to go home, deal with things that were happening there. I kept in contact with Kenyon. They actually paid for my flight back home because I was like, I am gonna, they were like, how about you leave by the end of this week? And I was like, okay, but like tickets are expensive, like from Ohio to California, and then like such short notice. And they're like, don't worry about it, we'll pay for it. You can keep your scholarships when you come back. And so then I just had to come through and do another process of coming back to Kenyon. But they've worked with me, and I'm about to wrap up. And so it's like, that's something that I totally did not expect to be a part of my undergrad experience at all. But Kenyon really worked with me. They said like, hey, you have a life outside of your 4 years of college, and we're gonna help support you and make sure that you come back when your mental health is ready to deal with that. And so I just wanted to share that story because that's something that I feel like most colleges would just kind of be like, okay, well, see you when we see you, like not really support you through that.
That is a really great story and really heartwarming. And I can tell you that similar thing happened to me my junior year, but my college did not offer to help in any way. They're like, oh, I mean, you could take a leave of absence, maybe, if you want. So that's very cool. I'm glad to hear that.
Yeah, thank you so much, Sean, for your willingness to share that, that story and be vulnerable and just authentic. I think people need to hear, the fact that Kenyon is the type of place that sees you as a person. It's not the type of place that if you would, and there's also nothing wrong with this. You could, if you want to go to a very large research institution or whatever, and be in a lecture hall of 100+ people, sit in the back and just remain anonymous. You can absolutely do that and still get a great education and have a good experience. But if you want to be in a smaller class size where you can't hide, you have to, and be involved and share your opinion and learn from other students and your peers and the faculty who are sharing their opinions on things, and have that standard of mutual respect and understanding, I think then the smaller environment might be a better fit for you, and that's the type of place like Kenyon. Just the fact that, Sean's advisor went out of her way to check, because she could just tell that something wasn't right, and she wanted to really find out if you were doing okay. And I've had similar experiences. I never took a leave of absence, but definitely utilize the counseling center. And I think it's something that, especially in higher education in today's, the amount of anxiety and stress that students and pressure that students are under, whether it be from parents or from teachers or from mentors or from themselves, putting certain expectations on themselves to achieve their goals, right? Students who are used to being high achieving students, they go to these, highly selective institutions, and some of them are pressure cookers where it's super competitive and you sink or swim, and it's like a dog eat dog world. And Kenyon is, and that's, some people want that. Some people thrive in that type of competitive environment. Kenyon is not that. Kenyon is not that at all. We are definitely more collaborative. We think that, if we can make a joint effort towards achieving, common goals, you're always you're better off than if you're trying to achieve a goal by yourself, right? No matter how brilliant you are. And the fact that your perspective on the world is going to only be enhanced and broadened by learning from other people's perspectives and having your viewpoint challenged, as opposed to just reaffirmed in every class that you're in. But thank you both for sharing that. Do you have any more questions before? I want to leave a few minutes. If we're going to be wrapping up at 3:30, I want to make sure I leave a few minutes for the application process type of overview.
Since we started a little late, would you guys be okay with going over by 10 minutes? Yeah?
Yeah,
Okay,
I'm
you
cool with
guys
that.
are okay with that? I am. I do have another question, and I'm sure I'll have more questions after you give us the application overview. That's why I thank you so much for bearing with us. Yeah, no, Sean, thank you so much for sharing your story. I think that was, I think it's just really great to hear these firsthand experiences, because when we talk to our students about fit, and what does fit really mean. We talk about the different types of colleges and the value systems that the colleges have. We also help the students really, introspectively explore and reflect on their own values and how do those values, pertain to their needs, and how can a college, kind of meet you there with what you really need as the unique individual that you are. So I often talk to my students about colleges that really focus on putting the well-being of the student first. And a lot of students then say, well, I do want to be happy and want to make sure I can talk to people, but I think what's more important to me is the research opportunity, or the prestige, or having heard of the school before, right? Things like that. And I think that the problematic thing with that is thinking that well-being of the student being a primary value of the college is often misinterpreted as therefore the education isn't seen as important. And I think your story just exemplifies how if a college really puts the well-being of the student as its highest importance, it truly adds to and improves your education, which has been shown, by all of the things that both of you have talked about that you're involved in, and how you, Johanna, you mentioned how it's really the evolution of the student that you get to experience yourself, and that you get to see in your fellow students throughout the 4 years, because there's so much to explore. And it sounds like, Sean, by you being able to craft your education around the circumstances that you were in, you actually gained a much deeper, more relevant and meaningful education along the way, and are still on your path. So I just think this is, for anyone who watches this recording or listens to this later, it's just such a great example of how a community and a university that really values every individual student can contribute so much to your overall well-being, and therefore to really your path in life, your path towards adulthood. So thank you so much for sharing that. I think it's something that's, a common misconception when you're younger in high school and just starting to look into colleges. And especially in our area, everyone's like USC, UCLA, and I'm not saying those aren't great institutions. I just think it's very valuable to open your mind to so many institutions that the US has to offer, because there are so many unique places there. I think that, I do have other questions, but I think I would love to hear about the whole admissions landscape. We're definitely interested in hearing about kind of the financial aid approach that Kenyon has, which is also very specific and open. So I think that's something really important to learn more about. And actually, I have a former student who's a freshman at Kenyon. So he had a whole journey as well, which is what really made me want to, host you guys here. So maybe you just take it away, and then I'll table my questions till later, because I'm sure you'll answer some of them along the way.
Yeah, sure, absolutely. And I just feel like I really wish that we had more time, right? Because there's so many things we haven't discussed, because the fact that, Kenyon, so before I go into the admission, there are just a few other things. I know we mentioned off-campus study earlier. I just want to highlight the fact that your need and merit-based aid at Kenyon, it will travel with you. And that's partly why such a large percentage of our students will study abroad or off-campus domestically. And I actually received a $5,000 check from Kenyon because my need and merit-based package exceeded the cost of the program that I was attending for that semester. And so that was just spending money that I had. And it really came in clutch, because DC is a little bit more expensive than Gambier, Ohio. When I was used to just walking around everywhere, and then I had to take a taxi or a bus or a train. And so, but that's one thing. I want to mention the fact that we didn't really talk about Greek life. We do have Greek life on campus. About 20 to 25% of the student body are involved with Greek organizations, but our largest Greek organization is actually a gender inclusive, volunteer-based organization called the Archon Society. And so Greek life at Kenyon is very inclusive, whereas historically I think it's about being exclusive, and that's just something that I always like to mention as well. Every Greek organization and student organization, it has to abide by our standards of excellence, a certain amount of community service hours per semester, and a certain amount of campus-wide events that they host as well. And then the other thing, and there's a lot, but the last thing I want to mention before is the fact that music, the arts at Kenyon in general, music, theater, dance, studio art are phenomenal. We have over 30 theatrical productions a year. Most of them are largely student run, student produced, and our a cappella scene is tremendous. I feel like there was a different concert or performance like every week. There's gonna be at least one, throughout the year. And so the arts at Kenyon are alive and well, and so I always like to mention that. And then I guess now just going in, and if you have more, if anybody wants to learn more, we have a ton of virtual offerings that we have, especially that's one thing that the pandemic, if we can find a silver lining, it has allowed us to be more accessible and increase our online presence. And so we will definitely be continuing even post-pandemic, our virtual offerings, just more likely, obviously, in a hybrid model, because we do feel like seeing campus in person is the most impactful. But Kenyon, we try to make it as easy as possible. Accessibility is really important to us. And so it's free to apply online through either the Common App or the Coalition app. When I applied early decision, there were multiple supplemental essays I had to write. Now we no longer require those supplemental essays, just the one standard essay on the Common App, the few shorter ones on the Coalition app. Then one teacher recommendation and your college counselor recommendation as well. Those are the only required ones. You can have as many teacher recommendations as you'd like. We typically see 2 to 3 per student. One of them should be from a core class, so that's something to keep in mind. We don't have any standardized test requirements this year. It's actually our first year that we've gone test optional, as I think most institutions in the country have, given the accessibility, the fact that the pandemic has either closed registration for different testing sites or limited registration. We decided to go test optional. We found about 50% of the students are choosing to submit their test scores, and the students who aren't sure, I think the best piece of advice that I would have from an admissions perspective is that if you feel, it's a personal choice, and if you feel like your test scores through the SAT or the ACT, which we do super score as well, so if you take them multiple times, we'll cherry pick your top sub scores to give you the best composite score possible. But if you feel like those scores are reflective of your ability in the classroom and you're proud of those scores, then submit them. If you feel like they're not, then you might want to think about not submitting them. And so that's just going to ultimately be a personal choice, and you have to do some introspection. I think, Josephine, you mentioned the introspection and the self-reflection that students are doing as they're in their college search process. That's absolutely essential. To know who you are before you can find out, the type of environment that you might thrive in, or the type of learning environment that is the best fit for you. And so that's something to keep in mind. What else? Oh, deadlines. So we only have regular decision and early decision. We do not have early action, which is the non-binding applicant route, I guess. So you can apply through early decision 1, early decision 2, or regular decision. The ED1 deadline is November 15th, and all of our financial aid deadlines, and I should have started with this because this was really important. If you take anything away from this, the fact that Kenyon meets 100% of demonstrated need. Not many institutions in the country do, and so but there definitely are a good amount. I think roughly 70 in the country, if I'm correct there. I believe so. And so whatever you qualify for in need-based aid and you demonstrate through the FAFSA as well as the CSS profile, which are both required for domestic students, the ISFA for international students is a requirement. But whatever you qualify for, if you're admitted to Kenyon, that's how much you will receive. And so we don't quite have the financial means to be need blind with our decision. So we are need aware, and that's something that we're very open and transparent about. We try to be as transparent as possible throughout the entire admission process. And so it's just something to keep in mind. You should be doing research to find out what schools do meet 100% of demonstrated needs, which ones don't, and keep that in mind when you're deciding where to apply. You should always have at least 1 or 2 schools on your list of schools that do meet 100% of demonstrated need if you plan on applying for financial aid. And so, because of the fact that we meet 100% of demonstrated need, and about 25 to 30% of each incoming class will receive merit-based scholarships. So we do have a truly meritorious program at Kenyon. We don't use merit aid as incentive to try to get students to enroll. Some schools will boast about 90% plus of their student body receiving merit aid. And in my mind, that's not because they're meritorious. It's really discounting their tuition and their room and board. So if you receive merit aid at Kenyon, it's because you're truly meritorious in our applicant pool, and that varies on any given year. But I just went on a little tangent there. I was originally talking about deadlines. And so November 15th is the ED1 deadline. Oh, the reason why I went off track was because I wanted to mention that the financial aid deadlines coincide with the application deadlines themselves. So ED1 is November 15th. You found out by December 15th what your decision is and how much your financial aid package is. Then January 15th is the big deadline. That's ED2 as well as regular decision. The large majority of students will apply through the regular decision applicant pool, but about 50% of each incoming class will enroll through ED1 or ED2. And that's, I think, in part due to the fact that we have a highly self-selecting applicant pool because of the type of niche school that we are, and all the many factors and the things that make us who we are as an institution. Most of the students who are looking at Kenyon tend to be really good fits. And so that's something that, they want a place that's academically rigorous. They want some place that has a really tight-knit community. They want some place that they can have a really close relationship with their faculty and be on that first name basis with them. They want the writers college, and that's something that is important to them. Even if they're not necessarily planning on being an English major, they understand the importance of writing and how that impacts your ability to communicate well. And so those students go ahead.
I'm so sorry. I have a really quick question.
Yeah.
Could you repeat again? You said that I think half the incoming class comes through regular decision and ED2. Is that what you said?
So I was saying actually ED1 and ED2. So like they'll ultimately enroll about 50%. We were just over 50% this year enrolling through one of the early decision rounds. Yes, and so
I had forgotten what you said, so that's why I'm glad I asked. Thank you.
No worries. But I'm glad you brought that up, because I wouldn't suggest that anyone actually apply early decision to Kenyon or anywhere else unless it's unequivocally your top choice, and you know that it's going to be financially feasible for yourself and your family. And so I'm actually going to put a link, and I know this may not be as relevant for either of you, Josephine or Amanda, but I'm going to put links in here directly to our net price calculator and the My Intuition calculator. And these are really good resources, free online resources for you to get a rough estimate of what your need and your need-based aid will be, what you'll qualify for in need-based aid for Kenyon specifically. So that is federally mandated that every institution have their own net price calculator on their website, but those algorithms are going to be different, right? So whatever your need-based aid at Kenyon might be different than what it is at X, Y, or Z institution. And so that's something to keep in mind. As a student, you would want to fill out a net price calculator for at least your top few choices to get a rough idea of what you'll qualify for in need-based aid. And 100% of our students who apply to Kenyon are enrolled in our general merit-based scholarships to be considered for that roughly 25 to 30% of the students who will receive merit aid. But we also have talent-based scholarships on top of that in writing, in music, and in studio art. And then on top of the talent-based scholarships, Sean mentioned earlier that he was a KEEP scholar, the Kenyon Educational Enrichment Program. And so KEEP is one of our two premier scholarships, and that's KEEP in STEM. And so these are loan forgiveness programs. You'll graduate without any student loan debt whatsoever if you're a KEEP or STEM scholar, and it's definitely worth looking into. In order to apply for KEEP, you have to identify as either first generation or a domestic student of color. In order to apply for STEM, you have to meet a certain amount of demonstrated need, and it's expected that you will major in one of the natural sciences at Kenyon because it's partially funded by the National Science Foundation. So those are the only requirements. Definitely worth looking into, and worth applying for, right? If you get that, they are ultra competitive, but I think you have to factor in the pros and cons to that, and so just something to keep in mind. Regular decision applicants will find out by mid-March, which we're going to be sending out decisions here soon, actually, for this year's applicant pool, and then they have until May 1, which is the national kind of signing day, deposit day, to hold their spot at Kenyon if they plan on enrolling. And so, yeah, that's kind of the overview. I'm sure there's some stuff I've missed, but I also want to mention that Sean's email, Johanna's email, my email address are all right here. If anybody watching this would like to be put in touch with a current Kenyon student with your, particular academic or extracurricular interests, please feel free to email me, and I'll kind of facilitate that introduction, and you can set up a one-on-one Zoom call and delve a little deeper into the conversation about your specific interests. And then Josephine, did you have any, or Amanda, did you have any questions at all?
Yeah, I have a few. I'll try and keep it short because I don't want to get too technical. But you had mentioned that the international students also submit something. So I was wondering, do you give money for need to international students?
We do 100% of
Wow.
we meet 100% of demonstrated need.
Wow.
Yeah.
That is very, very unusual. So thank you since I was an international student, that is close to my heart because I always thought I can never get anything for need. Sorry if it's a little loud in the background. But I didn't know about places. Sorry about that. I had an audio issue, but I didn't know about places like Kenyon. So I always thought, I have to go for merit only. That's the only way I can get money. So there are very few universities that open need-based financial aid up for international students. So that's really cool that you guys do that. That actually brings me to a quick question. Do you guys have a lot of international students?
We have a growing population of international students. Actually, we had a record number of international students enroll this past year. And so I think we're roughly 18% international. We have students from almost all 50 states and about 50 different countries across the world as well. And so large representation, mostly from large metropolitan areas. Actually, New York and Cali are the largest, aside from Ohio. On any given year, those three states we receive the largest number of applicants from. And I think it's because those students are looking for something different, right? And they know that you only have 4 years to go to a place where you can be very intentional with that choice and focus on you. You can be selfish. This is a good time as a student for you to be selfish. This is about your journey, about your personal growth, and about you building a foundation for the rest of your life. And so you have your entire life if you want to live in a large city or you want to live wherever, but you only have 4 years for your undergraduate experience, typically 4 years. And so I think that's part of the reason why people who are from cities, they visit Kenyon and they're just blown away, especially if you love the outdoors, if you love nature. There's not many campuses in the world. Actually, I remember, and this might date myself, but when I was a junior in college, 2012, I think, Forbes magazine or one of the large ranking type of magazines named Kenyon the most beautiful college campus in the world. And I posted it on my MySpace, which I thought was like, oh, no big deal. We go to, I go to the most beautiful college campus in the world. But yeah, so some of you watching this probably never heard of MySpace, but yeah, it was like the old Facebook kind of.
I love that. That was awesome. Okay, I have 100 questions, but I'm only going to ask you one. Can I do it? Can I? Okay.
Yeah, please.
Oh, it's so hard for me to narrow myself down to one. All right, I guess I'm going to ask you what I always ask everyone on every college visit, and to me, these are like my college visits. What kind of student would not thrive at Kenyon?
Sean, Johanna, what type of student would not thrive at a place like Kenyon? I have my opinion. Go ahead, Sean.
I think there's the obvious in that if you want to be let's say you want to finish your 4 years with a degree in something like nursing. Like we just don't have, you know, like a nursing program. So I think first look at the majors. And so like if you don't have a major that you want, don't come just because, you know, you want to do what you want to do. And if we don't have something like that, then that's a bummer. The second type I think is someone who is like, JJ kind of mentioned this, but someone who's like super, super competitive or thrives in a competitive environment. I just don't think that Kenyon would be the place for you, especially because even in the classroom, there's so many times where you do small groups or small discussions, or you work on community, you know, projects that contribute to the community, or, you know, you work in things, there's lots of times where you work in groups at Kenyon. And so I think if you're ultra competitive and, you know, want the limelight for yourself, I don't think that that would be super good. And then the third one is probably someone who's relatively closed-minded or narrow-minded, in that like they don't want to try new things. They're not really into, you know, I think I'm gonna leave it at that, like trying new things, because I think Kenyon really is somewhere where you're highly, highly encouraged constantly to try this, try that, join this, like this is available. And so I think that if you have any one of those three things, I think you could thrive. There's always the possibility that you will, but I think it will just be harder to thrive at Kenyon.
Yeah, and kind of building off of that, like one of the things that I usually talk about as like one of the fundamental truths about Kenyon is that it is a very challenging place. And it's not just challenging in the sense that it's very academically rigorous, but you're going to have really intense and at times like kind of uncomfortable conversations with people. And like through those conversations, you're going to be able to learn new things about like your peers, the world at large, and yourself as well. So kind of like building off of Sean's point, I think like if you don't want to be like challenged in that sense, I think a lot of students, like when they are looking at like colleges, they're like, oh, I want a place that's academically rigorous, but they aren't necessarily always looking for a place where they're going to be made to be put outside of their comfort zones and really encouraged and tested in a lot of ways that will, you know, that I said this word a lot, that will challenge them, but at the same time that will really help them grow as a student, as a person, just kind of existing in the world as it is right now. So that's my answer.
Yeah, thank you both. And I agree with you almost 100%. Sean, I will push back just a little bit on your first one about how if we don't necessarily have the major, that it might not be a good fit, because I don't think that's always true. I hear you, and I can see where you're coming from with that. But I do think that, you know, for example, I just posted in the chat, you know, the fact that 93% of the students, Kenyon graduates who apply to med school get into one of their top two choices. Actually, 98% of students applying to grad school get admitted into one of their top three choices. And so a lot of times I feel like, you know, for example, we don't have a pre-med major, we don't have the pre-law major, but we do have tracks for that. Same thing with engineering, for example. And so a lot of times students will come, they might go into like bio or chemistry as a major, and then ultimately they can pursue whatever the more specific route in grad school or law or med school. And so that's the only pushback I'd give. But I do think that a student that wouldn't thrive at Kenyon is somebody who wants that anonymity, somebody who wants to just be a wallflower and sit, you know, and kind of like take notes and memorize stuff and regurgitate it onto a test or a paper and, you know, graduate with a specific degree and go off and only do that one thing. If you're not wanting to, you know, learn to think critically and to have a well-rounded education, which is not for everybody, then I think those students wouldn't necessarily thrive at Kenyon as well, because you can't really be anonymous at Kenyon. And so, but that's a great question, Josephine. And I think a good way to end. I do want to end on a positive note, though, in the fact that, you know, there are so many great options out there. There are over 4,000. I didn't know this until I started working in admissions, but there are actually over 4,000 undergraduate institutions just in the US alone. And so there are a ton of great schools out there. Kenyon is just one of the many. And so I think Josephine mentioned the introspection earlier. You need to do that introspection. You need to reflect on who you are as a person and where you might thrive in, and really try to figure out where is a good fit for you. And also, I challenge the fact that there's like that one perfect place for every single person. I think you really could get out of any situation what you put into it and the perspective that you kind of have going into that, and so you can make the best of it, of everything in life. It really depends on your perspective. And so I think you want to find a place that has all the resources you need to pursue your passions to the furthest extent possible. But more importantly, and this wasn't until I was really a Kenyon student that I realized the importance of happiness. I think you want to find a place where you can imagine yourself being genuinely happy for the next 4 years. I do think that happiness is arguably the most important thing in life. And so I found that happiness at Kenyon, but I know plenty of friends who found happiness at other respective institutions. And so for you all watching this recording, we wish you all the best. Good luck with your college search process. Please be in touch if you need anything, you have any questions. Check out our website for the virtual offerings. We hope that you and your loved ones staying safe and healthy throughout the rest of this pandemic as well. And thank you, Josephine, Amanda, for having us. We're so excited that we could, help and collaborate for your students who are, going through this college search process.
Well, thank you all. It's been amazing. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Thank you, JJ, Johanna, and Sean. I mean, I really do feel like I just traveled over there and got a good glimpse into daily life. So thank you also just, for all sharing your personal stories. I think it makes such a huge difference when you're, searching for colleges. And I love what you pointed out, JJ. In the end, it's all about happiness. And so, it's all about following your heart, and we're kind of bringing us back to how you both said you decided to go to Kenyon. It felt right. It felt good. And yes, you can make 100,000 pro con lists, but I think these conversations with real people from real places are what really can give you that sense to tune in with yourself and feel out what will make you truly happy. So thank you so much for sharing all of this. Really, really appreciate your time.
Absolutely. Take care.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.